Do you want to know which Hot Wheels car is the best for every class on the new Hot Wheels DLC tracks? Yep, me too. I ran every Hot Wheels car on Canyon Racer Speed Sprint from B class through to S2 class, and here's what I found. Although the Hot Wheels Nash Custom is very slidey and loses grip around corners, there are very limited options in B class, and this is the fastest of the bunch. The 1949 Hot Rod is not as slidey as the Nash, but it still does slide. It has a horrible launch and is a very weak choice, at least with this tune. Funnily enough, even the Baja Bone Shaker is faster. It slides the least of the B-class options and is stable even though it's meant to be an off-roader. It lacks cornering speed, but overall it's better than the Hot Rod. If you want to race with an impossible car, try this power build for the Nash Custom in A-Class. Unfortunately, its handling is horrendous, so you can't even make use of the power, but it's funny to drive if you're feeling like a challenge. The grip build for the Nash is much more usable in a race situation. It isn't as slidey as the B-Class version. Overall, it handles very nicely, and it's better than the power build for this track. All trusted tuners have only made off-road builds for the F5 Hot Rod, so I used a tuner that I don't know for this car. Surprisingly, it destroyed the Nash Custom and felt like a perfect mix of power and grip for the track. It felt like a crossbreed between the Nash Grip and Nash Power build. This is definitely better in A-Class than it was for B-Class. In A-Class, the Baja Bone Shaker feels a bit more slidey than in B-Class. It feels as though it has similar power to the F5 Hot Rod, but it loses much speed in the loop-to-loop and is slower in corners with a wide turning radius. The Hot Wheels Diora starts out in A-Class with a performance score of 800, so there isn't much room for tuning. It clearly lacks power, but with the tune I used, it handles very nicely. The Twin Mill also starts at the top of A-Class with a score of 798. I hate this car. I hate this tune. It has weird gearing. It doesn't get out of first until 250 kilometers per hour. It doesn't like obeying my steering commands when going at high speeds. The Nash Power build was also doing this, by the way. You'll notice these cars braking and not turning sometimes, so they'll brake by themselves and they'll also not turn when you ask them to. I'm not sure if this is part of traction control. It doesn't make sense. I don't have any assists other than ABS and traction control. Would not recommend. The Mustang in A-Class feels good. It does everything I tell it to and handles very well, but it lacks power. For the Bone Shaker, I decided to use a power build, in which case it is by far the fastest choice for this track. It is the current world record holder for A-Class with a 142 being complete cleanly on the Rivals leaderboard. I wouldn't choose to use this car online, however, as it's very difficult to control and its launch is very inconsistent. The Rip Rod is very obviously an off-roader. It's like a dune buggy. All the tuners I know made off-road builds for this, so again I went with someone I don't know. It felt nice to drive, similar to the Baja Bone Shaker, but it wasn't a power build, and it also had a wide turning radius, which makes it slower when cornering as well. So, not a good choice. This was the slowest car overall. Don't choose the Nash, F5, or Rip Rod for racing on the orange track in S1 class. The Nash has been likened to a sausage because it flops around. The F5 and the Rip Rod heavily lack power and understeer a lot. The Diora continues to be a smooth drive for the Hot Wheels DLC orange track. It feels very smooth to drive yet fast. Across the classes it isn't the fastest, however it constantly feels like a fun choice and much nicer than you would expect for an ironing board. Funnily enough, the Twin Mill feels how you'd expect the Diora to feel, with a very wide turning radius. The gearing and speed feels much better in S1 class for the Twin Mill compared to the A-Class tune I used, and although the cornering is bad, it doesn't slide. So this car is definitely usable for S1. With an all-wheel drive tune for the S1 Mustang, it definitely handles better than the Twin Mill and better than the Diora, with a smaller turning radius, however it doesn't have as much power. Personally, I prefer the way the Deora feels for this track, as this car is a little bit too twitchy for my liking. The rear wheel drive tune for the Mustang feels very similar. It has a bit more oversteer, as expected, and slightly more power, but I couldn't really feel the power difference between these two setups, even though it does have more power. The rear wheel drive tune also has a slower launch, which is also expected. Of the two tunes, I would always choose the all-wheel drive tune. There are very few Bone Shaker S1 builds for road racing. None of the tuners I normally use has a racing build for it. This build has less power than the A-Class build I chose, and although it has more grip, the slick tires cause you to have a wider turning radius rather than the oversteer that the off-road tires gave in A-Class. It has the best time of all the S1 Hot Wheels cars, but it really feels like it's lacking. It doesn't feel as nice as some of the other options. Although the twin mill is slower, I would use it over this just because of the difference in how they feel. Not so fast. We have another S1 competitor, the Two Jets. This car feels slippery on the orange track, but it feels nicer than the Bone Shaker. It is hard to control, but it's my hero for taking out the Bone Shaker from the number 1 S1 position. On to S2 class. The Two Jets in S2 class is not as impressive. Yes, it slides less and is more stable, however, that oversteer from the S1 build actually allows us to corner faster. Yes, overall the S2 tune is faster, but the improvement from S1 to S2 class is very underwhelming. The Hot Wheels Bad to the Blade, the only Hot Wheels car that reaches 998 overall score. It's been found out to be the new grip king, surpassing the Koenigsegg CCGT. However, for our test, it needs power. Most Hot Wheels tracks have a strong requirement for top speed due to ramps and boost pads. So the tune I'm using isn't a meta grip build, as those builds are less effective on a track like this. Even without a meta grip tune, it maintains great speed around corners and performs better than all the other builds I've tested in every way. Click this video for a 2-minute highlight reel featuring the new content added in the Hot Wheels DLC.